Today we are going to learn how to make line plots. Sienna measured the lengths of her colored pencils. How can Serena make a line plot to show these lengths? Now, when we make a line plot, there's two things that you have to have. You have to have a title and you have to have a label. So if we look here in the data chart, length of Serena's pencils, that is her title. Your label will be whatever you're measuring in. So if I look at all the numbers, she is measuring each one in inches. So my label is going to be inches. If I look down at the bottom, where part B, where it says making a line plot, here we have our title and here we have our label. If you don't have those two things, then your line plot is not correct. So please make sure that you always have a title and a label. Now, if we look closer at the data, we can see she has the color and then the length. So we need to figure out what we're going to measure on our line plot. And if I look here, I have 5 inches, 5 3/4, 4 3/4, 4 1/8, 4 1/2, and 4 3/4. So I have to figure out the smallest fraction that I can use in order to determine where to put my lines. So for step 1, we're going to draw a number line and choose a scale based on the length of Serena's pencils. So if we look, we have halves, eighths, and fourths. Well, they are all equivalent to eighths. Since that is the smallest amount, we are going to be using eighths. So we have to mark halves, fourths, and eighths. The scale should show data values from least to greatest. If we look at our data and we look at the chart, the smallest size that she has would be 4 1/8. So that is our smallest of where we're going to begin. Start with whole numbers. We have 4 to 5. And in between 4 and 5, we have eighths. We have 4 1/8, 4 2/8, 4 3/8, 4 4/8, 4 5/8, 4 6/8, 4 7/8, and then 4 8/8, which would be 5. Now we're going to put equivalent fractions, so because not all of our numbers are listed in eighths. So I know that 2/8 is the same as 1/4. I know that 4/8 is the same as 2/4, and I know that 6/8 is the same as 3/4. I also know that 4/8 is the same as 2/4 and 1/2, because all of the fractions are the top half, the numerator is half of the bottom. Next, you're going to write a title for the line plot, which I've already highlighted in green. And we're going to label the line plot to tell what the numbers represent. That would be your inches. So we've got our title and our label. Now we're going to draw a dot for each pencil length. So we've got 5. We're going to mark the 5. Right here, we got 1 dot for 5. If I can see, I'm going to use different colors here to help you. For 4 3/4, I've got 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 dots for 4 3/4 or 4 6/8. And then we've got 4 1/2. We've got 1 dot, which would be the same as 4 4/8, and 1 dot for 4 1/8. Now you can easily see the data. When you are making a line plot, remember, you need a title, check. You need a label, check. You need to make sure that you're labeling the number line correctly and that you have a dot for each data point. All right, let's look at the bottom where it says convince me. It says complete the line plot. What is the most common shoe size and what size is the outlier? So for this one, they made it a little bit easy for us because we can see that we have shoe sizes, so we already have a title. This would be our label, right here, the sizes. On your math test, you are going to have to draw and create a line plot. So make sure you're remembering how to do that. Okay, also when I look at my data over here, I can see that they are listed in halves. So all of my numbers are either a whole or a half. The smallest number that I can see in my data chart is a 4. So I'm going to start my number line with 4 like they did. We're going to label in half, so 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, all the way up to 10. I'm going to highlight the numbers as I use them. So I've got 4, got 1 right there. Okay, now I got 4.5. So I've got 1 4.5 I can see. So I'm going to put that right there. For 5s, I don't see any 5s. For 5.5, I'm going to use blue. So actually, I'm going to use red to make it easier. So I've got 5.5. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5. That seems to be a popular one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For 6, I'll use yellow again. So 6, I've got 1, 2, 3. So 6, 1, 2, 3. 6.5. I'll use green. 6.5. I have 1. And I have 1 7. So I'll use red for that one. 1 7. And then I have 1 8. I'll use yellow for my 8. And 1 10. I'll use red. The next thing I always like to do when I'm creating a line plot, I count how many numbers that I have and make sure I have the same number of dots. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 shoe sizes. Let's make sure we have 14 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Uh-oh, I made a mistake. Actually, no, I did not. I just counted the dots wrong. I recounted them again, and there are 14 of them. Make sure you double check yours, though. I often make mistakes, and a lot of kids do. And it's okay to make mistakes. Just realize when you do. Then your brain's going to grow even more. Now, by looking at the line plot in the graph that we just drew, we can answer our questions. So we want to know what the common shoe size was. Well, the most common was 5 1/2. I'm going to put MC for most common. And the outlier, well, the outlier would be a 10 because I'm going to put shoe size because we don't know if this is inches or what. I'm thinking it is inches. Because the 10 is further away, it is different from the rest of the numbers. Now let's do the guided practice together. It says, use the table shown at the right to compare the lengths of Sandy's pencils with the length of Serena's pencils shown on the previous page. Who has more pencils that are the same length, Serena or Sandy? What set of the data was easier to compare and why? Okay, so let's switch over to number 3 before we do number 2 or answer number 1, and let's complete the line plot so we can look at the data. So if we look here, we already have our title, length of Sandy's pencils. It's right here. And we have our label. Since these are in inches, they're all in inches. Now we can create the graph. So we have the color, but the color doesn't really matter. We just want to know how many of each size that she has. So for red, I'm going to use the colors that are on there. For red, we have 6 1/4. If I look at the numbers, we're also counting by fourths this time instead of eighths. So 6 1/4 is right here. So I'm going to put a dot for that one. For blue, we have 5 1/4. So 5 1/4. For green, we have 6 3/4. So I'm going to label 6 3/4. For purple, let me see if I can find purple for you. Don't know if I have a purple. For purple, I'm just going to use blue. Okay, for purple, I have 5 3/4. For orange, I don't have orange again, so I'll use red. It's close to it. Orange, 6 3/4. So I have another 6 3/4. And then yellow, 6 2/4, which also would be the same as 6 1/2. So here is her data. So now we can answer a question. We need to compare the length of Sandy and Serena's. Who has more pencils that are the same length? Well, if you look at the other page, Serena has 3 pencils that are the same length, and Sandy only has 2. These 2 right here. So Serena has more pencils. Serena, S-E-R-E-N-A, has more that are the same length. I think it is easier to compare Serena's data from the beginning because it was already organized into a line plot. Whereas with Sandy's, we put it in the line plot, but by just looking at the graph, it wasn't as easy to compare. All right, number 2. Is there an outlier for the data of Sandy's pencils? Explain. Well, looking at the data, I see that all the numbers are close together. So I'm going to say no, there's no outlier because all the data is close to each other. There's not one number that's kind of further away from the rest. All right, so if you're listening to this, put a star by number 3 on this page. You are going to do the problems numbers 4 and 5 on page 599. They already have the title and the label for you. But go ahead and fill out the data chart, take your time, count, and make sure that you have the right amount, and answer the questions, and then please come see me.